Hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. It's been a while. I apologize. Got all excited for the new year, and then things weren't really meshing out for me, so I had to cut a couple Tuesday nights short. I apologize that, but I'm excited about tonight. I'm glad you're here. If you're here, please do me a favor. If you're watching on YouTube or Instagram, got to press the button for Instagram so I can say hi to all my Instagram peeps. Please just drop me a little comment. If you're in the group, unfortunately, I can't see you. That is one small problem with the software that I use. I can't see you live. So if you could just drop your name and tell me where you're from, that'd be great. Okay, so everybody gets, it's funny. We get a lot of lurkers on this one. I'll warn you, we get a lot of lurkers. So a lot of you guys are listening, and I get it, and that's part of what I do. Like, not everybody wants to, be like, hey, it's me. Because there's coaches on here, there's athletes on here, a variety of sports though, by the way. So I don't want you to feel like you're now that I said that, probably nobody's gonna leave it high or whatever. Get it. So but welcome everybody. Tonight's topic is COVID-19 and no, just kidding, totally kidding. The topic tonight is when your coach or coaches don't want it as much as you do. And the subtitle is lack of adulting and professionalism in coaching. I needed to kind of say that, and how I feel it's ruining a lot of athlete potential. Okay, and and listen, I want to start by saying, like, I don't want to turn anybody off from their sport tonight. That is not the point of this conversation. Okay. It never is. I'm all about helping our athletes and our families just get through the process successfully to the best of their athlete's ability. And if they don't, that they leave sports happy, healthy, connected. I always think a sign of a good sport, a good club, is how many people are still kind of alumni who come back. That's always a good sign. Okay. And I'm trying to get my Instagram here. So if that's not working for you, if that's not happening for your team or your club or your sport, then I always warn people that's a bit of a sign. Okay. So going live again here. There we go. So anyway, again, I just want to give that a little preface. If this is the first time you're watching or listening to me, if you're listening to the podcast, you're watching YouTube or anything like that, I want to just a quick introduction. So I'm Olympian Jonathan Edwards. I run a private Facebook group called Creating High Performance Athletes. I run a podcast of similar name, ilk. I've got a lot of, actually, we're going to do a lot of interviews coming up this year, which I'm really excited about. Have a couple professional baseball players. We've got some. I've reached out to Greg Louganis, which would be kind of fun, because one of the things that I am really passionate about now is athletes who have a successful or somewhat successful athletic career and then transition out of that and then have a successful life. Because what I've realized is that a lot of us are kind of scarred, and I don't want that to be. Okay, so I want to kind of dig into that a little bit and find out why and what have you, and dig into that a little bit so we can I can share that with our athletes, because the topic, especially the topic that I'm going to talk about today, is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart, because when I look back on my sporting experience, for those of you guys that don't know this about me, so I was an Olympian in the sport of luge. And my doubles partner and I, we split after the 94 Olympics, after the 95-96 season. And then I had a choice. I could go to college and play lacrosse, where I had been a high school American and I was a Division I recruit, and I had this opportunity to do that. But I said no to that. And instead, what I did was I went, I stayed in luge. And I paid a lot of my own money to do singles, and I did really well. The Nations Cup at the time, for those of you guys that are luge athletes, you'll know, like, the Nations Cup now is kind of part of the World Cup. At the time, it was actually a separate circuit that ran with the junior team. And so I had to pay my own way, rent my own car, stay in my own hotel. It wasn't part of the team because, well, that's a whole other story. But my first year, I did a few races in Europe and I won a couple. And then the second year, I won the overall World Cup title. And when I won the Senior Nations Cup title, Robert Fegg, who's now the head coach of the U.S. national team, won the junior national overall title, which is pretty cool. So I just thought I'd share that. But along the way, I had in both those sports, I had coaches that were, that I revered, that I looked up to. They were Olympians, they were all Americans, depending on the sport, and and it was exciting to be a part of that, and to look up to these people and have mentors. Only when I got out of sport did I realize that. Well, even when I was part of the sport, I realized that there's some athletes that were different than others, right? And some coaches that were different than others. And that saying, like, never meet your heroes. Um, that can happen if you stick around your sport long enough, where you start to see those people that you revered, and maybe they were like a former national team athlete who was a coach, but maybe they didn't make it to the Olympics, or maybe you had you're playing on a club team and you've got some college kids around who are coaching you. As a young athlete, you look up to all those people with reverence, right? And there's part of that's important, I think, to it's almost a facade, right? Like, for lack of a better term, it's a bit of a facade. We all have a facade, right? I'm not wearing any pants. I'm totally kidding. That's not true. I have pants. But the point is that we want to maintain some of that, obviously, to help our athlete. What triggered me, triggered might be a little bit of a strong word, but what triggered me to do this topic this week was a couple things. One, there was Luge World Championships were happening this past weekend over in Koenigsee, Germany, and they were on NBC, and they were wicked to watch. It was a lot of fun. It was a real super pretty week over there. Also, it cued a memory that I had in the sport of bobsled that I'll share. And also, now with the work that I do at athletespecific.com, where I have coaching programs where I work with athletes and their families in a variety of sports. So not just luge specific, not just lacrosse specific, or, I work with ice hockey, skiing, figure skating, equestrian, soccer, football, you name it. I have athletes and families, and I throw the families into that too, because it's a team thing. And we're going to talk about that in a second here. But the idea is that I get a lot. I have a different perspective than if I had only just done one sport and I was talking about this. Okay, so I'm coming at it from a lot of different angles, and so I also, I played lacrosse and ice hockey and soccer, and I was a goalie in all three. Played others, whatever. But one of my athletes that I work with this week was having. Well, one, I saw kind of the bad results of USA and Canada at World Championships. Now, the team competition was one thing, but that's a different story. But then a few of my other athletes, two of my other athletes, had issues this week with they're giving too much credit to the coaches who are around them, and also the athletes that they're around, and so this all kind of skews together. So I want to. I want to dig in a little bit, and so I want to just backing up a little bit. Like I said at the very beginning, my goal here is not to turn anybody off from their sport. Okay, I'm not coach bashing. I'm not here to get you scared. That's not the deal. Okay, I believe 100% that, like, my experience with coaches is that they are all incredibly hardworking, good-natured people who want their athletes to win. Okay, the critical word, though, is win. Because if you don't win, especially in Olympic sports, if you don't win, you have no program. Okay, money gets pulled. You're done. If you play lacrosse or soccer or any other sport, if you play for a club and that club doesn't win, well, guess what? Kids are going to go elsewhere. Like, families are going to want to go to the programs that win. Problem with that is that a lot of people get into sport and they go, "Oh, I just want my kid to have fun. We'll see how this all works out. I just want my kids to have fun." But at some point, for a lot of those people, the switch flips too late when they go like, "Oh my God, now we got to get serious." I'm here to tell you that the sooner you get serious about your sport, the easier the decision-making around it will become. Okay, let me say that again. The sooner your athlete can get serious, and I say athlete here because it's really up to them. Like, as parents, we know it's like we can put vegetables on the table and say eat vegetables, but then eventually they have to do it on their own, right? It's like brush your teeth, brush your teeth, brush your teeth. Oh, you didn't brush your teeth. Let's take you to the dentist and we're going to drill your head and we're going to come in through the outside of the cheek, right? That sort of stuff. So, but it's a team thing. So the athlete has to decide. And the sooner the athlete decides, the better. Now, part of this topic today, though, is sometimes the athlete's pursuit of what's great or what they believe is to be great is more than what their coaches are maybe familiar with or and every coach who's like, like in a national team program, even if they weren't an Olympian, they've been around enough Olympians to think like they know, right? And that's cool. Outside of Olympic sports, you have kids who've love the sport and they come back to coach. And if your athlete almost wants to have a work ethic that the coaches have to reel in, right? When I think of Michael Phelps, and I'll tell a funny story about Michael Phelps in a minute here, but Michael Phelps in swimming is a sport where you, like gymnastics, where you can find a coach and you basically Velcro yourself to a coach that is going to help you the entire process, right? And they have that experience, right? It's almost like finding an accountant who can help your business grow from 1 million to 2 million to 5 million to 10 million. If you have an accountant and they've only worked with businesses under $1 million, well, when you get to a point where you're building a business that's 2 million, 5 million, you've got to find another accountant. So a lot of times our athletes are like that business owner where they see this this big business, this big, they want to be Olympians or they want to play Division I or they want to go pro, like whatever it is, that's the ultimate goal. Well, along the way, a false sense of security comes around athletes who think that and parents that the coach that they're working with right now is going to help to get them that entire way. And that's not always the case. Okay. That's not always true. So one of the things I believe really strongly that, and this has only come in the last, I would say 15 years of me being around sport and coaching and whatnot. I believe strongly that to have a successful athlete. So here's the thing: to have a successful program, you have to have successful athletes. So the better the athletes, the better the programs. The better the programs, the better the sport. The better the sport, the better it is, like globally, like nationally and internationally, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, so pretty soon, someday when Elon Musk's when Elon Musk gets a rocket to Mars, which didn't go very well today or yesterday, but we'll have like intergalactic Olympics, right? Right? That's going to happen. So the idea is that the athlete helps push the idea, the development, things like that. When Michael Phelps was a young athlete, they found a coach that could like give him the work, and then look what happened. Okay, which is great. Not everybody's going to do that. I get it, but the point is that there's a synergy there. Now, part of that synergy is the parents. Okay, when athletes are young, and when I mean young, I'm pretty much talking up until about the age of 20. Okay, a lot of people think like young athletes are under 14, and then after 14, like 15, now all of a sudden they're old enough to like advocate for themselves, and I disagree. I disagree. I joke and I say, when you send your athlete off to advocate for themselves and deal with a coach on something, it's like sending your kid to go negotiate a used car sale, right? You probably wouldn't do that. Okay, so really important to just to kind of keep that in mind. And the reason I share that is because this past year I've had two college athletes who've been having difficulty with their coaches, and mom and dad are sitting at home just waiting for them to advocate for themselves and to speak up. And the problem rests like way before that, where there was no real relationship established. And I'm going to cover this in a second, because I think the idea of that saying that coaches should coach, parents should parent, and kids should play, and they shouldn't mix. I believe that's fundamentally flawed. Okay, and I'm going to cover that. I'm going to cover that here in a minute. So many parents back out too soon from the conversation, and I'm going to explain why. Okay. So I'll share with you a quick story. So I got kind of sucked into this. I did a YouTube video about this gymnastics coach, and I know I've shared it a little bit before, but it's funny because I still get comments on the video that I said, and people don't watch the whole video, and then they think I'm going one way with it, and they get all over me. And this one woman sent me a video clip. She sent me another YouTube clip of the coach in question had an athlete, and this athlete's mom, what she had done was gone through like all the videos that she had of like where she's videoing her athlete, but the coach was in the background. But they didn't got to the point where this mom was videoing just the coach and spliced together this footage of basically like resting bitch face. You know what I mean? You know, when and we all have this, by the way. Like I'm sure if you videoed me during the day or me dealing with my own kids, you would come up with me giving faces like what, you know, and if you splice together enough of them, you'd probably think like I was a complete ass. Well, that's what this woman did. And my comment, I haven't written the comment back to the woman who sent it to me. My comment was like, who the hell does this? Because in all the time that that parent has spent now after the fact, and what I mean by that is that at some point, the relationship between coach and athlete soured. Okay. And I've talked about this before because, and I talked about that in that video where relationships between coaches and athletes sour when one or the other feels that the performance expectation is not happening. So either the coach thinks that the athlete is not doing enough to be good, or they think they'll never be good. And again, I'm going to cover that in a second because I believe every coach should be, their job is to deal with the athlete at hand and helping them to get to the next level. They have to work with the inventory they have, not wish for other ones. It's very easy to coach really gifted athletes. It's really difficult to learn the skills to coach athletes where they're at and bring them up. And that's part of this. You know, that's part of where an athlete needs, you know, they want to get better. And sometimes coaches just don't have the skill set with which to help your athlete. All right. And so I'm going to cover a lot of that. But I thought, how crazy is this? Like this mom is basically, you know, paying this club to have her daughter go compete. And there was one clip where this, you know, athlete like fell off the balance beam, right? And slipped and fell and kind of fell like awkwardly on her head and shoulders. And this coach's face never flinched. And as a coach, you know, we've all done that. Like for those of us that have coached, we've all done this where, you know, you see athlete after athlete after athlete and you know what is good and what is bad. Well, someone who looks from the outside goes, "Oh my God, that woman didn't even react. She must be like the devil." No, she's just a high, like she's a like a high level coach who has, you know, hundreds of athletes to deal with, has seen a million falls just like that. And that is not to kind of bemoan her reaction because I'm sure given time, and we've all done this too, we look at the athlete, we watch, we see, okay, they good, they're not good, like then we go, right? But this mom was basically piling on, and I'm not here to give you permission. And in fact, I'm telling you the opposite here. I don't believe relationships should sour with coaches if the coach allows an opening with which to have a discussion. But secondly, and probably most importantly, the parents involved with the athlete bridge that gap right away and reach out to the coach and basically say this: hey, so we're at a point here with our sport that we are taking steps because our son or daughter loves the sport and really wants to go for it. That's all this is, right? That's all the decision is. And so your athlete then tracks on a path. It may be a junior national program or development program, you know, depending on the sport. It may be a club team, you know, it might be an out-of-state club team. It might be a regional team. Again, it all depends on the sport. But the idea here is that you are part of a multi-billion-dollar industry. Now, your team might seem small and a bit homespun. Like Luge is totally like that, right? It's homespun, and it's you know, you're not going to Dick's Sporting Goods to buy a luge sled off the shelf, right? But but the idea is like, but if you're skiing, you can go out and buy the best skis ever, right? If you're a Formula One race car driver, there are players like that earn a driving spot, but then there are also payers. And those are people who have very wealthy families who are willing or sponsors to back the driver to then compete, right? And that puts things a little interesting dynamic because and I love using F1 as an example because to me it's the perfect example of the entrepreneurial approach to athlete development and winning. Okay, because if you're not winning, you can keep throwing money at it if you want, right? But if you're not winning, you're cut. And really, sport is easier when you just commit to being like like I want to be an Olympian. Like when you say that, like I said in high school, I want to be a high school American. I want to be a Division I recruit. With luge, I was like, we wanted to be Olympians. That's why we were there. I tell young athletes on Olympic tracks, whether they're figure skaters or skiers or what have you, that, hey, the goal for your sport is already predefined. It's to go to the Olympics. It's not just to feel this out. And the reason I share that is because sometimes the stress that coaches feel if they have athletes around them that don't have that goal, that stresses them out. But what I want to talk about today, though, is when your goal feels like it's outpacing the skill set of the coach or coaches you have immediately around you. And this is where I want you to look at this in entrepreneurial nature, right? So like I said before, when I was young, I revered every coach I had. Like I remember getting to Lake Placid, New York, the first day at the old luge track, walking up the track with my mom up to Mount Van Hovenberg, and meeting some of the coaches and just being like, oh, that's Frank Maisley. He was an Olympian in '88. He's a flag bearer. Like that's cool. There was John Owen and Fred Zimney was a coach, and Dmitry Feld. Like these guys were all coaches, and I revered them all. And Dmitry was from Russia. That was like so exotic and cool, right? Because we're coming out of like the Cold War, And so that was all amazing, right? And I still love all those guys. Like as I talk about this, I don't want anybody starting to make their own assumptions. All right, because the people that I'm thinking about in my head that kind of fell by the wayside, I'm not going to mention. Let's put it that way, right? Especially in my lacrosse experience, this is really interesting because I was never on a high school team where other kids really wanted to play in college as much as I did. Okay. So my coaches, though, I was at one school and it was obviously my coach, one, didn't care enough to help me get to the next level. And in fact, I transferred high schools to get around another coach who wanted to help me reach that goal. And that was cool. Again, it's that entrepreneurial approach, surrounding yourself with sometimes other athletes, but definitely coaches and teams that can help you, that have that attitude. Okay. And really, this is like a life skill, right? This is nothing. And this is part of what happened to me. Like, only when I went off to school, when I went off to Stanford, when I learned how to fly from Bonnie Warner, who was also a U.S. Olympian in the sport of luge, and I met entrepreneurs. Like this is part of the Silicon boom in Silicon Valley, right? The internet boom in Silicon Valley. That's when I realized that there was this whole other level of professionalism and thinking and aspiration. And I am here to tell you that I did not go through my athletic experience. I was told that, hey, if you go to the Olympics, like the world's your oyster. Doors are going to open. People are going to think, like, they're going to know that you can make anything happen. And that didn't really quite transfer for me. I was lost there. I was falling back into luge. I was disappointed I didn't go back to college to play lacrosse. And I didn't really have any coaches around me to help me on that next level in my life. And that's something that can happen. And a lot of athletes suffer with life after sport because they think like, oh my God, this Olympic thing is is so cool, right? And it is, right? Like NBC covers it every 4 years. Everybody watches it every 4 years. And what happens is a lot of people who don't really have much going on in their life go, or even if they do, think, wow, the Olympics is really sweet, right? So like you leave your sport and go like, well, now what? Okay. And what I really wish I had been told, and I want to implore this to you now, listening to me, is that it's really important that your athlete understands, win or lose, if they make it to the Olympics or they become a Division I athlete or not. The important thing to understand is that they have a skill set with which to approach this challenge. So this, for many athletes, this is the first big challenge in their life, right? I would say unless they've like had a state where they've overcome cancer, but the idea here is like life is just a series of challenges. And the deal here is that the whether it's the Olympic challenge or the Division I lacrosse challenge or the professional athlete challenge or the hockey challenge, whatever it is for you or for your athlete, it's just life is just a series of challenges. And so for the parents who are listening to me who have a young athlete going like, all right, how the hell are we going to do this? All right. eh, Okay, how do we overcome a challenge? Well, one of the things we need is we need people around us who believe in the same vision that we have. Now, the key thing in those words is that it's your athlete's vision. Now, a lot of athletes, when you're young, don't know what the vision fully entails. That's not the point, right? Like when you go after anything, I say that you've been gifted with an idea, whatever you believe in. God, Buddha, the little cream signs in the top of your Starbucks coffee, like whatever it is for you, energy, law of attraction, any of that stuff. The idea is that has fallen on your athlete for a reason and it's fallen into your family for a reason. You don't have to figure out all the X's and O's, but on a macro level, you do have to know that, hey, uh, that one of the most important pieces here are going to be the coaches that are around your athlete. Now, what I realized over the last like kind of 15 years of my life, especially my wife and I, we had a furniture company. For those of you guys that don't know, we had a furniture and interior design company. Life takes you in some pretty weird directions, right? And we bought this little bedding store and grew it into this 8,000 square foot retail store and grew it up to a few $1 million in sales and things like that. And I realized as I was learning and immersing myself in that whole world in business, coming back to like meet the coaches that I had been around, going like, wow, some of them are kind of stuck. And what happens is your athlete has three key abilities. I've said this before. They need a physical, a technical, and a tactical ability to be successful. The problem is the coaches in your life typically are stuck in the technical. They want your athlete to be at a certain level of performance because they want to win. Sometimes they need to win. Or they and then what happens is if your athlete doesn't fit in their bubble, so I kind of look at every coach like they have a sphere of knowledge and influence, meaning your athlete may work with one coach and have a grand time. Another athlete may work with a coach and be like, oh my God, it's the worst coach ever. By the way, that's what happened with that gymnastics coach down in New Jersey. Like she got banned for abuse, but there's still parents and athletes going like, she's amazing, right? And so you may work with one coach and go, wow, can't stand this guy. But this guy over here, phenomenal, right? In small sports, sometimes you don't have a choice who you get to work with. And that's where, to me, the word adulting comes into play. Years ago, one of my best friends, Walter Corey, who now works with the Canadian Olympic Association, he went off and he got his MBA. And he was he was the high performance director in the sport of luge. Went off to got his MBA. Now works with the Olympic Committee. And I remember he was working with a psychologist at one point, and they said, "You're amazingly skilled because during your day, you work with everyone from young athletes all the way up to adults, like sponsors and stuff like that." Many times, coaches who have athletic backgrounds are only really skilled at, and sometimes not so skilled at working with young athletes. And so they just want to be able to kind of impose their will on the athletes, say, do this, no questions, so that they can then focus on the things that they enjoy best, which is their technical ability, right? I don't know a lot of coaches that like to deal with like angry parents. And unfortunately, for the parents out there, there's been enough psycho parents ahead of you that they've ruined this path. So you have to tread lightly, right? As you go to your coach and go, all right, listen, we're trying to make this, whatever the dream is for you, happen. Okay. And you have to take that entrepreneurial approach. Again, the problem is a lot of times that coach is not skilled at that, right? They just want to immerse themselves in, and I remember when I was I was out of the sport of luge. I was coaching. I was in Park City. I had this phenomenal team. I should say some of the kids were phenomenal. Others were like not as a gong show. I'm, I'm working on sleds. I'm taking kids to the hospital who tweak their ankle, and then I've got this parent who's calling me like daily, and he's a dick. I don't know. I don't have any other way to say it. And I just like, that is not cool. And so I tried to do my best at the time to spend the time. And in the course of a busy day with 15 athletes, this dad was trying to take an hour of my time, like daily. That doesn't work. All right. I'm not giving you permission to do that. What I'm giving you permission to do, though, is to get in touch with your coach enough to realize, like, okay, how does this coach feel about my athlete? What does this coach feel that my athlete needs to work on? All right. And because this coach is trying to create winners. And if they're not trying to create winners, then they're kind of a dud, right? And that happens in some sports, like some programs, like they can't get anybody else. Like I remember, like after I left luge, I became a strength and conditioning coach, and I worked with some of the top strength and conditioning minds like on the planet. And I looked back at some of the strength and conditioning coaches that I worked with, and I joke, I say my body is the result of all the strength and conditioning coaches that I worked with in my life. But some of those strength and conditioning coaches who I revered, mind you, were not the best in the business. They were just the ones willing to take that job and have that job to put on their resume when they were trying to get somewhere else. And so I'm not saying that about your strength and conditioning coach, but what I am saying is that it's worth thinking about that concept, right? Because I want your, whatever coach you're working with, I want you to be gently nudging them. It never works to hit somebody over the hammer, okay? From the coach to the athlete's perspective, and vice versa, from the parent to the coach perspective. Like when things get fractured, yeah, it's not a good day. It's not a good day. So I think everybody can deal with a good sense of humility and just like, all right, listen, we're all trying to win here. What do we need to do, right? In the best case for the athlete. You may realize that your coach is stuck and not have any other options. Okay. It could be because of geography. It could be because of finances within a program, whatever the reason. When you identify that, man, I'm not really I don't really feel good about this coach. The critical question you have to ask as a parent is that just your bias as a person? Like, is it a personality thing? Okay. When I was really young, I've got to tread lightly here because there's people on this call who are familiar with what I'm about to talk about. Let's put it this way. No matter what your sport, if your sport has Eastern European or communist influence, okay, there's a different level of thinking. There's a different level of personality. There's a different level of approach and discipline. And I remember when Mark Rampant and I were a doubles team, and this was leading, I think this was in like 91, might have been 92 season, but Wolfgang Staudinger, who was our coach, he said, like, on the German team, if your start's not within a certain time of the top sleds in the world, we're not even going to look at your sled. And we were like, dang, no one's really told us that. But what was really interesting was that in the U.S. program, that although Wolfgang Schadler, who's now with China, who's phenomenal, Wolfie is not really known to be a hard ass. Okay, and I would think the U.S. we had a great team back then. We had a lot of really good people. We didn't always get along. Like at one point, I think they brought in a psychologist to go like, why aren't none of our guys and girls getting along? What's the deal? But but the point was is that we needed that tough love, and we put in the work. And when we got to Lillehammer, we had some of the fastest starts in the race. But before then, we didn't really have a great attitude, and that really it really shifted things. But that attitude had I had seen that attitude elsewhere in North America, and people freaked out at it. They're like, "Oh, we don't work like that. We don't, that's not our way." That is on you then, right? It's E plus R equals O. Event plus your response equals your outcome. So your coach, even though you may feel like your coach is not working in your best interest, they may actually be working, telling you everything that needs to happen, but you are resisting it because of a personality difference. And I use the communist kind of Eastern European example because in North America, it can rub people the wrong way in a big way, especially, I'm sorry to say it, but especially women. Okay. That being said, though, that doesn't give permission for bad results. And it doesn't give permission, in my opinion, for coaches to not want to work with your athlete because they feel like they're not going to be the one. You know, I feel really sadly, there's a lot of athletes up in Canada who've come in and out of that system. And I'm talking pretty critically about that now because I can't recommend that program to women. I can recommend it to men, but I can't recommend it to women because they have just cast aside way too many people. And I think there's enough history there to go like, all right, maybe it's time for somebody else to help develop athletes and develop that program. So I'll leave it at that, but I'm not happy with it. Because there's some athletes that I fought for and put time into, and they should have made it, in my opinion, but the powers that be just kind of are casting aside, like, nope, not you. And that happened, like, I've seen that happen to other athletes in the US program as well. But again, I don't want to get anybody scared. I just want to make you aware of like, all right, listen, this is something to be not avoided, but addressed, right? And to be aware of. Okay. Because I think right now in the US program, and I was disappointed that I was disappointed at both the U.S. and the Canadian results at World Championships in the last week. So if you don't do luge, this is a little off topic for you, but the idea is I was disappointed because I think what like this will get fixed with Robert Fegg, but again from that German program, like this is the way we do things. But I think what happened to both the U.S. and the Canadian programs who missed the first half because of COVID is that COVID excuse was an excuse. Like, we're not going to go. Winners win. And your coach, if they are driving you to work harder or be on time or to tighten up your bootstraps, that sort of thing, that is good advice, in my opinion. If they're telling you that you suck, you're more than welcome to get a second opinion and fight through that if your belief is strong enough. But there's also sometimes too where maybe it isn't the path, and sometimes you don't know that until late, right? Like if your son or your daughter doesn't grow, right, and now all of a sudden they're doing singles and now they're not growing, that's a tough, that's a tough place to be. But then you can look at who's a little Austrian dude. You can always look for an example of an athlete that has done more with less. I've got a couple athletes who are lacrosse players in the United States. And just this past week, we did that. Their coach was like, "You're not going to make it." I had a coach tell me, "I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to be an All-American. I'm not going to be a Division I recruit. I'm too small. I'm too this. I'm too that." And I did it, right? So you always have that permission. I give you that permission. And that's one of the things I want to encourage you to do, because if your coach, if you feel like you haven't established a relationship and that coach is keeping you stuck and they don't have those skills to help get your athlete to the next level, I don't believe the coach has permission to discard your athlete, but your coach is doing the best with what they know, right? Everybody does the best with what they know at the time. I really truly believe that. Okay. And I don't like when parents or pile on to a coach who, who lacks a certain skill set, right? It's that cancel culture, and I don't like that. Um, One of the things that kind of just I want to touch on that, if your coach is pushing you, okay, sometimes your coach is pushing you and your athlete doesn't have the vision, okay. This is where sometimes the coaches and the athletes that are around your athlete can hold them back. I wrote about this in my book, in An Athlete's Guide to Winning in Sports and Life. I say the number one thing that's going to hold your athlete back is each other, their team. Okay. And so I want to encourage you to know that if your athlete, has Olympic dreams, and the athletes, even though your athlete may be on a junior national team program, that doesn't mean those other athletes all have the same dream. Okay. What your athlete needs and what your family needs is intention. Okay? And I use the example of a flower pot. Okay. So when you look at a team, whether it's a baseball team, a lacrosse team, a luge team, a bobsled team, like whatever, ski team, when everybody's all in their gear, it's easy to think that they all have that they're all the same flower, all in the same pot. And they all may look the same, they might look like little seedlings, but the difference is what's in the pot. So like if you have a pot around a flower and you go to water that plant, but that soil is all like rocky, that water, what's going to happen to the water? The water is the coaching knowledge coming into that athlete. That if that soil is rocky, that water is going to flow right through and out the bottom of the pot. Okay. But if your athlete has intention, and all intention is like, all right, like, listen, we're on track to be, we're paying for these programs. We want to be a professional hockey player, right? So we're looking to become a professional hockey player. When you have that intention, then the coaching knowledge lands in the pot, and that pot is soil, right? It's peat moss and all that, those little foamy bits that grab the water to keep it, hydrated. So it's up to you as the parent, typically, because again, I don't believe an athlete can really advocate for themselves until they're past like just 18, 19, 20 years old. I really don't. I just don't. I think up until that point, it's got to be a team. And I don't care if your athlete says like, "Oh, don't take pictures of me. Don't come. I don't want you in the meeting." Whatever. It's like, no, you gotta kind of. But that gets more to be your relationship with your child than a professional approach to being an athlete. That's gonna fall in your household. I can't. I can give you advice, but you have to decide if it's gonna work or not. But for the most part, stick your nose in there, right, and look at it and bring your professional advice. What happens is, if you have young coaches involved with your athlete, okay, and I hate to blanket statement young coaches, but I'm throwing myself, when I was young, I'm throwing myself in this pile. I was unconsciously incompetent. Now I quickly became consciously incompetent. So what this means is, when your coach is unconsciously incompetent, they don't know what they don't know, right? Or they don't know that they don't know. Okay. They don't know that they don't know. When you're consciously incompetent, you know that you don't know, right? Then as a coach, you morph into, um, well, I won't go into all the details because I screw up all the words in my head if I don't have them in front of me. So anyway, if you Google competency quadrant, you'll see it. But the idea here is that if you're dealing with young athletes, or young coaches, a lot of times they don't yet have the vocab with which to articulate how they were good. I've seen a ton of athletes who have been scarred by young coaches. Okay. And not deliberately. A lot of people think like, oh, that coach is like using psychological manipulation on that kid. That kid's not smart enough to like balance his own checkbook. How do you think he's smart enough to be like psychologically like messing with your athlete? I don't buy it. Um, I get these ads because I'm always in the space of coaching and whatnot. I'm getting these ads on Instagram for a Michael Phelps skill, like coaching thing. And I'm like, Michael Phelps can't articulate like the gift he was given to be the athlete. He can't, say like, hey, your kid needs a long torso and a short inseam too, and big feet. Like, no, that's like, what are you going to tell me other than work hard and get up early and eat 13,000 calories? You have to realize that young coaches have one set of skills, and you as the adult, right, in this whole piece, need to go, all right, we're advocating for our athlete here. We're seeing like, is this working? Are we progressing in the right way? Um, and if not, asking questions to find the right answers. Okay. Older coaches, as I said before, I believe older coaches, they need to take the approach of working with the inventory that they have. And what I mean by that is the athletes that they have. Years ago, I coached in luge, I've coached in lacrosse, I've coached in hockey, and it's all in soccer, my son's soccer teams and stuff like that. Now, there's always kids that are outside the sphere of ability of your coach. Like, I even said that to me. Like, I remember I had a kid, my son was like 11 years old. We had this kid on the team who was above and beyond my pay grade, which was volunteer. All right. And there's times when I was short with that kid going like, dude, and with the parents too, like, I can't babysit your kid and have 20 other kids to deal with, right? So you have to understand, like, where do you sit in all this? But again, if you go back to this idea of you just commit to like, all right, we're doing this, then all this discussion gets really easy. So coaches should work with the inventory in front of them, and their job, and I believe this 100%, a coach's job is to help your athlete get to their next level, right? Their next level. So if your kid is like an Olympian, that coach needs to help them get to that next level. If your kid is the worst kid on the team, the coach still needs to help get them to their next level, barring that they are not a huge time suck. Okay, and because that's a wrong fit in my opinion. Okay, so but again, for the parents out there, if you establish a relationship at the very beginning, right? At the very beginning, like, let's say a club wants your kid to play with them, and you've got to ask, like, who's coaching? Like, what are they doing? What's going on? What's the expectations? What kind of offenses do they run? What kind of defenses they run? Who else is going to be there? How many kids are going to be there? This, that, and the other thing. Who's coaching? What's their experience? Those are just good questions, right? Because you wouldn't not ask good questions for any other, I would hope, any other experience in your life. Like, if you're getting referred to a surgeon to take out your spine, you're going to want to know some things about them, right? So you got to take that same level of approach to your athlete and their experience in sport. Okay. Know what's going on. I started by sharing stories of athletes, like, not, you don't want to know your heroes. When I went to the White House after the Olympics, we went to a school for presentations. They split all the Olympians up in groups of 3, and I went with a couple skiers. And I kind of knew these skiers a little bit. One was very famous. And after we did our little talk and our little presentation, we're out in the lobby, and I feel this tug on my pants and my pant leg. And I look down, and there's this little like Hispanic kid with his mom, and he's tugging on my pants. He's like, sir, I want to do the luge. I've never forgotten that. And I looked up, and the mom was just looking at me like, oh, he just loves the Olympics so much. And she goes, I would just be honored if my son was just like all of you. And I was like, all of us? Like, I didn't say this to her, but I'm thinking like, all of us? Like, because I know, like, she's sleeping around and he's got a drug problem, and so let's just kind of all be like, let's, of course I looked down at this kid, I'm like, yeah, buddy, and I signed his shirt and did all this stuff. I'm like, let's go. But I don't want you as parents to have this like naive approach that just because your program has given you a coach, that they have all the skills necessary to help your kid progress. Okay. And your athlete better than anybody, right? if your athlete is calling home and they're in tears every day, you got to relay that to the coach. Okay. Because again, I believe coaches are out there to help, right? They really, truly want kids to win. I have that. I do believe that, right? But I'm going to leave you with this. You have to take 100% responsibility as to how this goes. And the reason I say that is because if you don't, if you place blame, if you say that, oh, the coach is horrible, like when I started bobsledding, later in my life, I got to the point where I finished third at Canadian Nationals in bobsled. I almost competed for a spot to go to Whistler. And I've told this story before, but I just want to share it again. I'm training in Whistler with the Alberta team. And because of my luge background, because of my Olympic background, because of all those Eastern European coaches I've had and some not some Eastern European coaches I had, I knew what I needed to do. I knew what it was going to take. And part of it was showing up on time and taking care of your stuff. And one of the things you do in bobsled is do a track walk before a session. You start at the bottom and your teammates take the sled up the top, and the drivers, like, you all walk the track and you see your lines, you do all this stuff. But the idea is, like, if the session starts at 6, where first sled is in, like, ready to go in the grooves at 6. And that wasn't happening with this program. And the guy who was running the program, we were starting sessions like 15, 20 minutes late, and the sessions were only 90 minutes. I'm like, I could get an extra run in that time. Now, not everybody else didn't have the same luge experience I had to drive, but the point to me was that being on time is like the littlest step we can take, right? And if I'm going to be on time, if your best athletes are going to be on time, well, you don't hold back your best athletes from your athletes that are just learning. They can learn as you go, and part of learning is getting up the hill on time. And so I had it out one day with the guy who was kind of the head of the program, and I was like, yo, let's go. And his response to me was like, we're not all Olympians here. And I said, when does that start? When does that approach start? When does that mindset start? So if your athlete is, whether they're on an Olympic track or they're trying to be a professional in another sport or whatever, that attitude starts now, right? And as soon as you take that attitude, then you go to your coaches with a very different approach. You work with your coaches like you're handing them off. Like, here, they're yours now. I've had them for 11, 12, 14, 15 years. Now here, you take them. Oh, wait, you're not a parent. Wait, but that seems okay to me. Here you go. No. The job here is to be committed to the path that you're on, to the goal that you're on, but then take 100% responsibility. Because if you end up walking away from the sport for whatever reasons, it just didn't work out, or just for whatever reason, you can leave cleanly and clearly, and your athlete can go, hey, we did all we could. I did all I could, and it just didn't work out, but man, I still love this sport. And that's really, really important. Okay. I want to leave you with that. Okay. I think that's a good spot to leave on. So, every day I work with athletes across North America and a few overseas, and with the work I do at Mental Performance School and the Athlete Breakthrough Blueprint. And the idea, the common thread, I will tell you, between all my athletes, and sometimes we have to make this shift, is that they no longer look at themselves when they show up at practice. They no longer think of themselves as just like everybody else. And it's not a cocky thing, because internal confidence, if it leaks out, is perceived as cocky by other people, right? So if you swagger in here, and I'll be like, you're pretty cocky, but in my head, I know you're pretty confident, but most people would go like, oh man, she's so cocky, like, ugh, right? But if you're confident, then, and you're committed to what you want to do, and you're confident in your path, then all of the knowledge, like I said before, all that coaching knowledge, when that water hits the pot, man, there's just receptive soil. It all makes sense. And so a lot of times that coach that you might think doesn't have the same aspirations that you have, if you communicate and you get on the same page, then everybody's working in the same direction. That flower is going to grow faster than anything. But if there's disconnect, if you're kind of like, kind of wishy-washy, like, oh, we're going to see how it goes, like, oh, whatever, like, I'm just like her and she's really good, like, oh my God, like, we're the same age and we're from the same state, and oh my God, I have the same gear she does, but she like is way better than I am. That attitude is not helping your athlete. So my athletes, we establish this idea that you're not the same. You may not have the same result right now, but that doesn't mean that your intention is the same. And what I've learned over time from all the athletes that I've come in contact in my own life as an athlete, but also all the coaches in my life, is not even all the coaches have the same intention. Some coaches are well paid. It's a great life. You get to see the world if you're, in a sport that travels, or you get to deal with kids all day and they don't really talk back too much, and it's a good deal. But from your perspective, I want you to take a very entrepreneurial approach to this and go, all right, what's the goal? This is the goal. How do we get there? We need all these parts and pieces to come together, right? And you then have to take 100% responsibility to make the parts work that you have, or if they're not working, seek out other answers. Because like I said, when it doesn't work out, or when you're done, you can walk away clean and go, hey man, that was great. That was a great challenge. We didn't get to the level that we really wanted to, but man, we walked away and this is great. So on to the next challenge. Right? So I'll leave you with that. Thanks for watching, everybody. On Facebook, on YouTube, we had really good numbers today, which is great. You guys can't see the congregation of all my stuff, but it's pretty sweet on this end. So Ellis out in Salem, Virginia, appreciate it. Man, Linda, Ellis, leave me a like, a high five, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. And do me a favor, for those of you guys that are in touch with other folks, okay, Gretchen gave on with her little hockey player up in New Hampshire. Hey, Susan Richards Kilmartin, good to see you too. And it's not Groundhog's Day today, is it? Really? No, that can't be true. That cannot be true. But do me a favor and share this with somebody and send them my way. If you ever got a question for me, Coach Edwards at athletespecific.com, or you can hit me up on Facebook. I'm pretty easy to find. And then if not, then you can find me on Instagram at Olympic Jonathan. But listen, I want to work with your athletes someday too. So I'm a bit of a hired gun for the athletes I work with in a variety of sports. So if that's you, don't be a stranger. Reach out, athletespecific.com/call, and just book a time. We'll get on the phone. We'll chat about it. So Chad Pastor, good to see you, buddy. Jorge Ravenna, you're still over in Switzerland. You're so lucky. My God. All right. Take care, Jorge. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Cheers. Bye.